Hi guys, welcome to the latest installment of Game On. As you can see, we are outdoors again. The colors on the leaves will tell you that it's fall. The temperature outside will tell you that it's spring. So we're doing another exterior in staying somewhat socially distanced and socially distanced from everybody else. So on that theme, actually, one of the things about the present world as we're dealing with it is, tabletop games. It's harder to get a group of people together and play in person. So the virtual tabletops are really coming into their own right now. But it's a new experience for a lot of gamers. And there are some things that you may not expect that are going to happen with a VTT that Justin in particular has run, and he wants to give you some tips on what to expect and how to prep so that you can be more successful. So let's dive in.
Yep, I got here five tips here that you didn't think about thinking about before you started running your first game on the virtual tabletop. Let's get started.
Okay, so you got 5 tips on how people can be more successful. What's number 1?
Yes, well, before I preface any of this, I'm trying to be fairly system agnostic when it comes to the VTTs. Because there's plenty of them out there. Fans of the show know that I like the Astral VTT.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any harm in telling people ones that we've had more experience and more success with.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here, what Justin's talking about here, can be used with virtually any virtual system.
Exactly. So the first one that I want to talk about, the number 1 tip that I have, is getting familiar with the VTT system before you even bring players into the game. Because it sounds like an obvious thing, but just getting started and then suddenly inviting everybody, I did that with my first time playing on Roll20. I had no idea what I was doing. I just invited everybody to play, and it was a train wreck.
So don't sign up to be an Uber driver before you have a driver's license, you mean?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Good tip.
Yes. And it seems trivial, but some of these VTTs have a lot of like cool little intricacies to them that you don't really know about. And that actually kind of leads to whether or not you want to use the free version, like a lot of them have, or the subscription version. Because the subscription version can give you a little bit more things to play with. A couple different ways to run the game that's different from just the free version.
Well, I wonder if, obviously having more bells and whistles is awesome, and having the subscription version where you have more features to play with, but that's also more stuff to learn.
It is also more stuff to learn. So one of the reasons why I like Astral so much is because you almost get the same thing with their paid or their free. So the only thing different is that you get to store more data on their cloud servers for maps and character creation. But the more bells and whistles you have, the more confusing it can look. Dynamic lighting is one of them. I know that you and I have talked about this before. If you want to be able to hide monsters behind a wall, some VTTs don't have the ability to do that with the free version. You have to have the monsters out just plain in sight of everybody.
Well, is there a way to get around that? Say that it doesn't have dynamic lighting.
Yes, that means that you should make another separate map. And that other separate map means that you'll have to, as the DM, toggle from the map that you're on now to the new map with everybody. And if half the party is on one part of the map and half the party is on the other part of the map, that's the other map that's not being dynamically lit. It's kind of a pain in the butt.
Well, what if you were to make a larger version of the same map? Like you have the first half of the map here, and then the second version of the map has all the material from the first half, but extended out for a second half as well. Would that work? Is that something that these systems support?
I can see it working with games like, or VTTs like Tabletop Simulator, but they also have a fog of war system. So in the end, if you're going to do that, just be prepared as you're building your maps to know that you have to make them bigger than you think. Okay, and speaking of maps, I want to go to my number 2, and that is, you don't need a map for everything. I know that I know that there's a whole bunch of I ignited a flame war online right there, but the thing is that you don't need a map for everything. Obviously, you want to have maps for all your cool set piece encounters. You want to have maps so that your players can play with their tokens on the VTT itself, but just like when you and I play around a table at the game store, sometimes we don't have a map for everything, so we just kind of use our imaginations.
Right. I mean, but you, even if you don't have a map, you do have to be prepared. You have to know what sections of a game can work without a map and what sections of a game can't.
Exactly. And I will say this, that I do keep a kind of a log of maps, like a backlog of maps that are different kind of environmental types. Okay. So that I could use them as in a pinch if I need to.
So universal or generic maps.
Yes, yes. You don't have to make the animated crazy maps. I do have some of those sometimes, but honestly, I think sometimes your players are just having fun if it's just a generic map with just some sand on it if you're on a beach. You don't have to worry about animating waves.
I mean, those bells and whistles are fantastic, but when you're immersed in a game as a player, a lot of times you're not looking at that stuff. Like, if you're in a room where action is happening, you're not looking at the drapes, right? So remember to focus on the things that the characters are going to focus on.
Yep. Focus on the important parts of the map. So you bring up a good point.
Yeah, and as a player, again, in the experiences that you and I have been more with me playing in your games because you're the VTT guru amongst the two of us. So, like, I find that as nice as it is to have visuals on those systems, again, the more I'm drawn into the story and playing the game, the less I notice the visuals. So they're great, but they're not crucial.
Yeah. And I will make one quick side note that just doing a Google search, there are a lot of free maps that you can just kind of save, download, and use. So, 2 Minute Tabletop, they did our almost all of our 9 p.m. to Philly. The house was all 2 Minute Tabletop, his stuff. So there's a lot of cool free stuff out there. So
and then it's just a matter of organizing what you got.
Exactly, and that could be another video. Organization for RPGs.
You in real time have just seen us with our planning for future videos happen.
So I want to go into the third tip, if that's okay.
What if I said no?
Well, then we can talk more about the maps, but I'm going to go into the third tip.
Good call.
And that is, when it comes to making your monsters, I'm just going to use D&D as an example because I think that's the most broad example I can use. Don't worry about every single detail when you're making the monster for an encounter. So here's an example. If you're going to fight a goblin and you're going to make a goblin, don't worry about the goblin's insight check, or don't worry about the goblin's like proficiency in Arcana or no proficiency in Arcana. Just, they have a short bow and they have a sword. Their AC is 15 and they have 7 hit points. That's really all and you got to worry about their saves.
Keep it simple, stupid, with stupid monsters.
Exactly. Okay. Now, set piece monsters, if you were to run like Curse of Strahd on a virtual tabletop, you want him detailed out because he's a set piece monster. Like he's the main
He's going to show up multiple times and he's going to do multiple things.
Yes. So put the work into the monsters that need the work, but the random encounter monsters and the small fry stuff, don't spend hours trying to fine-tune these guys in the VTTs.
Well, and I actually think that advice is probably good whether you're working on a VTT or on a tabletop, right? Like, don't get sucked into a black hole of filling in extraneous details with NPCs or creatures or anything that don't need them.
Yeah.
But learn to recognize where your time is well spent.
And that's not to say that, like, if just in case your players decide to try to diplomacy the goblin, well, you can have the monster manual open and ready for the full stat block if you need it, or just write it down on some note cards so that you have the rest in case something like that happens.
One of the nice things about VTTs is it's easier to bluff because they can't see you. So if you have to make something up off the cuff, they're not going to know. I mean, you have a notebook and you have something scribbled down, or you have the manual open and you have to look it up real quick. Yeah, they're not going to see that.
Yeah.
So you can with a little bit of organization and anticipation, you can solve those problems for yourself.
Exactly, and having all that organization is good in the long run, as we may see in other subjects. But I want to go into number 4. Number 4 is a big one because you and I have discussed this before. I'm lucky enough to play on these VTTs with people that I know.
Usually, yeah.
Usually, but I have played with groups that I have no idea who they are. And the issue is that if you go into like Roll20 and you go into their forums looking for a group, looking for a DM, you could get some people who will either intentionally or unintentionally derail your game, only because, well, as you have said it, they hide behind a screen. They can kind of act a little bit more macho than they might be.
Yeah. Everybody gets a little braver when there are less consequences, I guess, is the way to do. But so how do you cope with that? Like, it's one thing in person. Like, that's hard in person because you're facing, like, if somebody's brave enough to sabotage your game to your face, that's, you got to deal with that. But on a computer, it's probably going to happen more often, but it might also be easier to cope with.
So there have been a couple of interesting games that I have run where I've had to, the first thing that I try to do personally is I just try to say, hey, can we take a minute take a minute? And I try to talk to that person by themselves.
Yep.
Just say, hey, I want to know where you're going with this, or is there a reason why you're doing this? Is there something I can do to better accommodate you? Sometimes I'm not a psychiatrist, but sometimes they're just they might have had a shitty day, and they're kind of just lashing out.
Yeah.
Pardon my French.
Beep.
But sometimes, which I have experienced, they are just I changed my words there. And I've literally just kicked people from the game. I don't want to be that guy, but if there are people who will continuously try to screw you up, or do things that are not good, it's not so much me. It's bringing down the other players.
The other players, yeah.
So
it's your job to protect their good time.
Yes, because it's our game, not his or hers.
Right.
So.
Well, and here's something that I wonder, like, is there a way to prep ahead of time if in the run up to the game, right? Talking with people, giving them expectations?
Yep. So I did this for, again, I'm going to reference 9 p.m. to Philly just because it was the one that everyone has seen. But everybody who was in there, I think I didn't ask you these questions, but I knew the answers. I asked everybody who was going to play a certain set of questions. I said, can you maintain, obviously this is for fun, but will you go out of the way to destroy everyone else's good time? No, I literally asked that. And okay. And, a lot of these guys are streamers, they're YouTubers, they're part of the Tabletop Dungeoneers. They were all like, no, we understand.
Yeah.
And I haven't run a group for randos online for forever. But if I ever did, I would ask them questions. I would talk to them first.
Yeah.
I need to know who they are.
Yeah.
Because sometimes some DMs and some players just don't mesh well. So, and make sure that they understand the expectations of you and you understand their expectations. Which actually kind of leads into our number 5, and that's having a session 0.
Yes.
I think session 0s are very important these days.
Especially for VTT.
Yeah. For just going on from our last point, talking together and making sure that everybody's kind of familiar with each other is really, really smart. If you have the time, a session 0 that can last a couple hours where you just get friendly with each other, perfectly great. But that's also where you want to work out the technical difficulties.
I was going to ask about this, because guess who's not great at those? Like, I'm really good with technology in real life, but somehow when it comes to VTTs, I always manage to find the hole in the system and fall in it.
Yeah. So the session 0 is going to be the time where, in case somebody is new to that VTT, you can kind of help them through it, because there are some that are much more complicated. Tabletop Simulator is literally a 3D space that you control hands and you roll. It's like a virtual reality tabletop, as opposed to Astral or Roll20 or Foundry, where it's just a 2D plane. So that has a higher, a steeper learning curve.
Probably more technical demands too.
Yeah, yep. It's not browser based. It's literally like a game that you run with your graphics card. So it's make sure that your players kind of understand most of it. It's okay if you forget. I remember during some of my games, I go, "Oh crap! I forgot to tell you how to do this. This is how you do this." But that's also where you're going to want to really learn what you're going to use for a voice. And camera, if you're going to use camera.
Yeah, we've encountered this. Because are you going to run a secondary? Are you going to use the in-system audio component, or are you going to use a secondary audio component?
In-system audio components usually are terrible. So that's why a lot of people use Discord. TeamSpeak has kind of fallen out the wayside, so it's a lot of Discord these days. So.
From my own personal experience, Discord goes a lot more smoothly than TeamSpeak used to. But also, you can run it on your phone. You can run it on the same machine that you're running the game on.
Yeah.
So there's choices that players and you need to make.
Yeah.
And trying them out ahead of time and figuring out which one works better.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. The very first game is not fun if you're an hour in just hearing robot voices. If you can't hear one of your players, it's better to fix that in the session 0 than on session 1, because then you're going to lose players.
Yeah. Yeah, people get frustrated and they said, to hell with this, and that creates all kinds of chaos. It's just like a virtual business meeting that people have on Zoom or whatever. Like, you got to troubleshoot and technically sort of sort out the bugs so that everybody can be productive in a meeting. Well, the gaming environment is exactly the same way. You want all the bugs and the wrinkles ironed out so that you can just get to the fun part.
I agree. Well, that was 5 tips that I think you should really think about before you start playing a game on a VTT. Doesn't matter which one it is. Those 5 tips is something you should really think about.
Well, and that's the key is look, if you haven't run a game on a VTT before, it's hard to anticipate what you're gonna need and what's gonna go wrong. So having sort of a checklist of things. All right, did I try this? Did I anticipate this? Did I answer these questions? Do I have materials prepped?
Yes.
So that I can deal with this in the moment, is even more important with a VTT, I think, than in a live tabletop environment.
Yes. So I thank you guys very much for watching. If there's any more questions about virtual tabletops or anything else that you want to see us do, don't forget to ask.
I have a hunch that we're going to revisit VTTs in different forms and talking about some of the other issues and complications, because this is a big thing, and it's obviously taking over and becoming an even more important part of the gaming environment these days. So there's lots more to talk about. So we'll be coming back to this one, but if there's specific things about it that you guys want to hear us discuss, or you have suggestions about ways that you've solved problems you've encountered and the solutions to them that we can help sort of broadcast out and get the word to other people, we'd love to have you give us your thoughts on it too.
Exactly. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
As always.
And game on.